So, dear guests, let me allow, as a president of the InfoBalt Association, to start our meeting. I'm very glad that all of you survived during these 2 last very tough days, and it is a big honor that we even increased our team, and today we have very honorable guests, Mr. President of Estonia, Mr. Toomas Hendriks Ilves, and the top management of the Digital Europe, Mr. John Higgins and Peter Olson. Logo of our meeting, last day's meeting, is create, connect, grow. I think that during these 2 days we really showed that we can be well connected. And what we heard yesterday, that the most important thing, the financial instruments from the side of Europe are arriving very soon on the next period of the financing. And I think that will allow us to move fast on our growth. Of course, our face, our voice in front of the government structures of the Europe community is Digital Europe, and I'm very glad to give the voice and the management into the hands of the Digital Europe, Mr. Higgins, please.
I'm the Director General of Digital Europe. Digital Europe is the organisation that represents digital industries, that IT, telecoms, electronics, consumer electronics, large and small across Europe. And our members are drawn from well-known brand names that you would know, the large companies, global companies that work in Europe, but also many small companies, thousands of small companies, and we enjoy the benefits of their membership through our national associations, such as our very good colleagues here, InfoBalt, in Lithuania. And it's a great pleasure for Digital Europe to be hosting this event jointly with my colleagues here in Vilnius. My personal background in cloud computing goes back quite a long way. In 2004, the British government asked me then if I would host a joint industry government task force to look at the potential of something called grid computing, which was something that the UK had invested in heavily in the university sector. Then in 2009, the then CIO of the British government approached my association in the UK and asked me if he thought any of my members might be a little interested in helping the British government formulate a government cloud strategy. We were overwhelmed with the rush. We had 100 people volunteered to help the British government put this together, and so from that came the British government's G-Cloud programme, which was, I think, one of the first examples of a government programme to adopt cloud computing. Where it is today, it doesn't matter. Perhaps we'll hear something about that. Today in Digital Europe, we have a Cloud Council, and you will hear a little bit more about that in the question and answer session later. Now we have until 11 o'clock for this session, so an hour and 45 minutes. We have, I'm sure you will agree, an extremely impressive lineup. Do I need the microphone?
Yes.
Do I need it? Because we're broadcasting. Thank you. We have a very impressive lineup, as I'm sure you will agree. From the President of Estonia, we have a CIO from Finland, we have industry representatives, we have local entrepreneurs. I don't think there's a viewpoint missing. And to start the ball rolling, I've asked Mario Campolago from the European Commission to set the European cloud scene. So each of our panelists will speak to you for, I hope, around 7 minutes or so, but it could be less, preferably not more. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we have an opportunity for a panel discussion, and we like you as the audience to participate with your views and your questions. So I'll start with you, if I may, Mario. Speak from wherever you wish, and to set the scene on the European cloud scene.
Thanks very much, John. President Ilves, distinguished guests, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'll try to give you a brief overview of the initiative on cloud, the cloud strategy for Europe, normally associated to 3 pillars, one addressing the aspects of standards, the other one addressing the aspects of safe and fair contracts, and the other one associated to what we call the European Cloud Partnership. Let me just say that one of our main focus is really this perception that when we talk about cloud, in particular in cloud, I think that when we think about an European company that is able to produce and provide and deliver cloud services, we are looking to an environment that ideally will be the internal market, the 28 member states. And obviously when we come to procurement, this is also one of our assumptions a priori. And therefore, our strategy focused very much in trying to overcome some of the limitations, some of the fragmentation that exists today in national legal frameworks, for example, in terms of data protection, in terms of contracts, consumer protection, even in terms of criminal law. And all what we are doing is trying to overcome those aspects to make the cloud market flourish in Europe. Let me just say 2 or 3 things about each one of those topics. On standards is particularly important because the standardization is a crucial element to ensure that we promote interoperability and that we strengthen to a large extent the confidence that we have in the cloud services. They are essentially, when we think about seamless communications, when we think about, for example, data portability, and in this respect they will avoid the customer lock-in situations and will promote competition. It's also very important that we assess the aspects of certification, and in particular the aspects of voluntary certification schemes. Some of them already exist, and others are emerging, and we are helping them to emerge to really focus on the cloud services. For us and for the consumers in general, the ability to verify that the service provider has implemented the appropriate technical, but also organizational, in particular aspects, for example, of security and data protection, measures are very, very important. Also in contracts, particularly when we talk about small and medium enterprises, it's very important that the contracts will help in ensuring that we have a transparent and fair market and aspects, again, of data access, portability, protection of personal data, protection against, for example, cyber attacks, and liabilities in case of damage are particularly important in this context. So here you get 3 reasons why in our cloud strategy we are looking in particular to standards, to certification and to contracts. But one key element in our strategy was the creation of this so-called European Cloud Partnership that has 2 important, I would say, parts. One, a steering board, and President Ilves gives us the honor to lead this steering board. The other one, an opportunity to work in terms of the public procurement in Europe. When we think about the steering board, we are very glad that in this steering board we have not just the representation of the member states, but also of the private entities that somehow create this dynamic between public and private, this partnership, this European Cloud Partnership, to discuss matters that could be of interest not just for the public sector, but also for the promotion of cloud in the market in general. I will not talk a lot about the steering boards, but I think that this group has been really playing a very important, a very crucial role in creating better conditions for cloud in Europe. We have there represented, as I said, key market actors, key private sector actors, and also the public authorities. And the discussions under the leadership of President Ilves have turned to be very, very important. In particular, after the last meeting that took place in Tallinn on the 4th of July, coincidental with the post-PRISM era, the discussions were very, very important and focused, for example, in the importance of creating an European data area, a sharing data area. Those aspects that I suppose that President Ilves will address are crucial for us in Europe. But let me focus a little bit on our efforts to promote the take-up and the adoption of cloud by the public sector. In fact, we have one arm of the European Cloud Partnership that looks in particular in the procurement aspects for public authorities. We launched this project called Cloud for Europe. Our idea is that through these projects that brings together 11 member states, we'll be able to drive the first steps towards a better public procurement of cloud services in Europe. And this is obviously exploiting the power of common definition of requirements on the demand side from the public procurers in liaison with the supply side, i.e. the cloud service providers. We believe that this will make potentially the public sector more effective, i.e. we'll expect that we can save money, that we can do more with less, and that we can also stimulate the emergence of an European cloud industry. Eventually, we could reach the point where we could go as far as going to a joint procurement across borders. But the time will let us know. We have great expectations in this activity that is just launched, and I take the opportunity to announce that the first public event of launching of this Cloud for Europe project is taking place very shortly, mid of November in Berlin. We think that the take-up of cloud computing by the public sector in Europe will benefit very much from the dissemination of the best practices, and it is precisely these best practices that are expected to be one of the results of the pre-commercial procurement that Cloud for Europe initiative is taking on board. Let me make a short reference also to the fact that in the recent conclusions of the European Council of October, cloud features very prominently. The heads of state and government actually confirm the importance they attach to cloud computing as an enabler for the economy, for the productivity, and for better services to our citizens. But they went further. They stated that cloud computing should improve access to data and simplify the sharing of this data. They also welcome that we make all the efforts to provide the right framework conditions for a single market for cloud computing in Europe. They, in particular, focus on the importance of high standards for secure, high quality and reliable cloud services and on the promotion of those standards. And interesting enough, they come to specifically note the very valuable work that the European Cloud Partnership has done so far, encouraging the Commission and the Member States, with the support of this European Cloud Partnership precisely, to continue to make every effort to put Europe at the forefront of the cloud adoption. Interesting enough, the European Council conclusions bring together not just cloud, but cloud, open and big data. And this is very interesting because we have here three elements that are distinctive factors coming out of the so-called internet economy. And I think that when we realize the importance of internet economy up to now, we will realize it even further if you think about cloud, open and big data. Very, very important. We are also in the verge of starting the Horizon 2020 program. And again, you will see there our commitment towards cloud. in two types of activities. One, promoting further research, but also trying to promote innovation. You will see that we'll use instruments like PCP, public procurement for public procurement, pre-competitive public procurement, but also procurement of innovative solutions. Those are mechanisms that we started exploiting in the Framework Program 7, but it will really will flourish more in the Horizon 2020. By allocating budget to these activities in the ICT part of the Horizon 2020, what we want is not just to promote and support the cloud adoption in the public sector, is also to try to promote the innovation in the market in general, and therefore strengthen the position of European actors in the global market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. So, as you heard, President Eels, the President of Estonia, we're honoured to have him with us today. He was asked to chair the European Cloud Partnership that Mario described as an important part of the European Cloud Strategy. President Eels, we're very pleased to have you with us.
Good morning. I'll be telegraphic here simply because we don't have that much time and then we can discuss later, but just a couple of points. The last time the Cloud Strategy Group met, it was the morning that the first revelations came about the NSA, the NSA Snowden revelations. And at the press conference, I said, well, this is an opportunity for Europe because in fact, most of cloud services that are offered in Europe today are offered by U.S. companies. It became clear from the first news that, in fact, the problem was that the U.S. companies being subject to U.S. law and jurisdiction and the extraterritoriality of U.S. law meant that, in fact, they could look into cloud, and this should be a spur to move on with the cloud. We'll see what happens when we have our next meeting next week, what the thinking is. Unfortunately, because of NSA, of course, there's so much confusion and there's so much stupidity by policymakers or people who should know better that, we find everything from saying, let's stop trade negotiations with the United States to we need our own NSA. I read these things and you people have no clue, which is a problem, I think, and it's become over-politicized. Clearly, the cloud, the cloud, I would first also argue, is a bad word. Cloud associates with fog, with not knowing what's going on, something that is vaporized, vaporware, it disappears, things clear up, that means that's no longer cloudy and it's good. So in other words, the cloud is unfortunately one of the worst metaphors we've chosen, and I think that is already a block. Now, the cloud is highly mystified. We have a cloud in Estonia. We never call it a cloud. We didn't even think of calling it a cloud, but it works as a cloud. Here, and I would say that when we look at the European levels, clearly in our interest to have European standards, European regulations that would do a cloud, or whatever we want to call it. On the other hand, my worry at this point going into Berlin next week is that because of all of the uninformed paranoia about what cloud is, what NSA is, that in fact we could be faced with problems as opposed to, maybe it's not going to be an impetus to move ahead, but rather everyone has become so fearful that we will see the opposite. We will see the equivalent of what we see occasionally in Europe, the renationalization of policy and an antagonism toward creating an all-union or union-wide cloud. And I think that's a real threat, which before was not the case. We in Estonia will continue to do our thing anyway. And I will say perhaps later on about how we're moving in this direction within our neighborhood. Let me just say a few words, just because there's not much time right now, the first thing about cloud and NSA, which I just like to put out there, is that NSA is all about one of the three parts of computers, of digital security, and that is confidentiality. That's good. That's one area. What affects the cloud and how cloud and the fears of cloud and the issues we have to deal with cloud are not confidentiality. It's another part of it, which is integrity. You don't want to put data up there if you think that it can be manipulated. You don't want your medical records, your financial records. You don't want those. You want to make sure that if you put it in the cloud, it's not going to be changed. That's much worse than someone seeing what your medical records are, is that someone can change your medical records. And so far, to my knowledge, it may change, but to my knowledge, there has been no indication of the NSA changing anyone's data. So for the point of view of companies, banks, states, individuals, hospitals, the NSA issue, as bad as it is, or whatever it is all about confidentiality. It's not about integrity, and the issue that we fundamentally face when it comes to the cloud is integrity. And of course, accessibility, which is the third component of cybersecurity. Can you get what you have? But in any case, I think there is so much misinformation, so much misguided thinking right now on these issues that I'm concerned about the whole process being halted. The other thing about the mystification of the cloud is that, well, it is mystified. I mean, the issues of cloud computing, in fact, I would argue, from our experience in Estonia, are reducible to the legal framework, to the architecture, and then technical solutions. By the legal framework, what I mean is not simply standards, but something as simple as, and what was an ultimate sort of kick for us to have a cloud, though we didn't call it a cloud, is we have a simple rule, a law in Estonia. You may not ask anyone for their data more than once. If it's a government, anything to do with the government. So if you have already put in your number saying this is my personal ID number, it is the government's responsibility to find out whatever it needs to know. So if you want to register a company in Estonia, and you're whatever, Estonian, you have to, everywhere you register a company, you have to say, what are your record, all of these things. Most countries you have to go and prove you're not a criminal. You have to prove that you have no outstanding debts before the tax authorities. In Estonia, you put in your ID card. Since the law says it cannot ask you these things once they have the data. They have your tax records, they have your criminal records. So this is what enables us and gives us the competitive advantage of registering a company in 15 minutes. Because let the computer do what takes you hours to do, or days. Just look at the data. It's all the data. They're all there, which was the whole motivation for Estonia to computerize as heavily as it did. Is having no people. We wanted computers to do the work that people do and do much worse. Those areas where they do it worse. So that's a legal part. The architecture is crucial, that you want to have confidence in the architecture. So we have I guess we now call it a distributed public service bus. It operates on the same principle as an enterprise service bus, but it's a distributed public service bus, so the data are all over the place, and is for the public sector. That's the architectural side, and then the technical side takes care of the integrity, because because you can't really alter things. Between having a public key infrastructure and then also actually now moving on to actually authenticating individual data bits, we are sure of integrity. So there are solutions which are legal, solutions which are architectural, and then there are finally technical solutions which we leave to the guys with PhDs in higher mathematics. Where all of this will go and where it is going, regardless of the EU, we are already working with Finland on a common platform, which will mean that services will be accessible on a common platform. Finns can use their finish services in Estonia ultimately. I mean, we just started this. Estonians who are in Finland will be able to use their services. So, for example, we're not there yet because it's all very complicated, but for example, in Estonia we have a digital prescription system. 97% of prescriptions in Estonia are done online, which means if a doctor says you need to take penicillin, he writes it into the computer, and you, without having a piece of paper that you can't read, but you just take your ID card and you can go to any pharmacy in the country, anywhere, and stick in your ID card, SIM card, and the pharmacist gives you your medicine. That's very nice, but Estonia's not too big. Now, if we have a common platform, then an Estonian who happens to lose his medicine somewhere up in sort of 1,000 kilometers north in Oulu, he would go to the pharmacy, stick in his card, and the pharmacist there would say, oh, you have a prescription, and give you the drug that you need. Now you can imagine this in all kinds of areas. Of course, the obvious place that we start is with the finance ministry, because we have so many connections between each other, and all kind of people try to play funny games with taxes. So that's where we start, because it's revenue generating. But anyway, these are the kinds of things we're moving ahead with. This is all cloud. We don't call it cloud, but this is the direction to go, and these are the kinds from the services from the public side that can be developed, that should be developed, we think, all across Europe, but given some of the reticence in other countries and their lack of knowledge on what it all means, it's not happening. But we will do it anyway. We hope. And I'll say one last thing, because there really isn't any time, but I'll just say that where all of this becomes a fundamental issue is that that ultimately, right now we all have rules saying we cannot take public data and put it outside of our borders. That's basically every country has rules like that. And with the NSA, it's going to be even worse. We see this, with the ridiculous statements I said before. In fact, it's probably in our interests in Europe to actually be able to store our data in multiple locations across the European Union. After the experience of Fukushima, where we saw that data were in fact unique data were lost because of a natural disaster, that in fact one of the things that we should be doing in Europe is actually distributing our data and having sort of different copies of our data in different places. Again, I fear these kinds of very sensible solutions with a misunderstanding of what NSA is about will in fact move in the opposite direction. But I think we can come back to all these issues, because I can talk all day and I won't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's great to get a view from the top, as it were. If you want to know more about the Estonia story with technology, there's a very good Ericsson video that was made of that whole story. It's an excellent 40-minute video that really gives some very good insights into the journey that you had in Estonia, I think, with technology. Very good. So we now have, in a sense, 3 parts to the panel. So I'm going to have 2 more speakers who will give you a public sector perspective. The CIO of Finland, an early adopter, also like Estonia, you've already heard mention. And then from here in Lithuania, Rytis Kalanauskas, who's from the Ministry of Transport and Communications here in Lithuania. So 2 public sector perspectives. And then 2, I think, local industry perspectives. We have joining us Ilya Laws is on the panel, and Dalia Sputkas. They will talk about the local industry's approach to the public sector cloud market. And then we'll finish with 2 perspectives from industry players who have very broad experience of providing cloud services on a global basis. So that's Dejan Chetovic from Microsoft and Xavier Bouchon from HP will finish the session this morning. So you've got 40 minutes to sit there yet, Xavier, so that's okay. So let's carry on then with Timo and talk to us about public sector cloud in Finland. Timo is the Chief Information Officer there in Finland.
Mr. President, respected hosts, good morning everybody. Thank you for invitation to this panel, this interesting panel. As I said, I'm Timo Valli and I come from Finland and from Finance Ministry of Finland. Finance Ministry of Finland is responsible for all the public sector ICT. That means that all the municipality ICT, all the state administration ICT is our responsibility. And there is a lot of public sector organizations in Finland. There is over 300 municipalities, the local level government, and then over 100 state agencies. And all those organizations, they are quite old. They are, some of them, for example, my Ministry of Finance is over 200 years old organization. And some of the state agencies are over 100 years old. And that tells us that there is a culture and there is a history of, and that is very long history and very long culture. And the culture is not a digitalized one. It's an old administration culture. In Finland and maybe in Europe as a whole, we have three nasty coincidental problems at the moment. We don't have enough growth in our economy. We have wrong kind of structures in production. We produce wrong things. We have wrong kinds of knowledge within our workers. We have, at the same time, we have that growth problem. We have unsustainable public spending. We have too much of expenditures within public sector. We use too much money. In Finland, we use 9 billion euros more than we have in income in a year. So that's quite a problem for Finland. And then we, at the same time, with these two problems, growth and unsustainable public spending, we have global downtrend within the developed countries. And those three coincidental problems, they are very nasty combination for a developed country like Finland. When we start to discuss about ICT, there is very important to understand that we need dynamic and well-managed ICT in public sector and of course in society, in the whole society. But that is not enough. We also need a right usage of ICT in processes. We need a new kind of service design for the ICT which is well managed and dynamic to be of value. And of course, in the beginning, we need a very good understanding what kind of effects and what level of effectiveness we seek from the production of ICT, usage of ICT in public sector processes and services. And those usage of ICT service design and effectiveness of the public sector, they are maybe more important than this dynamic and well-managed ICT. They are questions to be asked in the beginning. And in Finland, therefore, we have done strategic work. We have a Prime Minister, Mr. Katainen's government, and we have, at the moment, we have action plans for 3 strategies. We have one demand-side strategy for public sector ICT. That is made by state agencies and municipalities together. Then we have a second strategy, which is more supply-side strategy, where there is taken into account the structural problems of Finnish ICT industry. You know the story of Nokia and how dependent Finland was from Nokia. Nokia laid off a lot of people, and now we are in the middle of a problem that we have knowledge, we have lots of resources, and we should plan how we will benefit from those resources. And we have a strategy for that. And that was done between the government and the companies and the association of companies, ICT sector industry. And that is very good. And the third strategy we have is a kind of defense strategy. If these two were offense strategies, the defense strategy is, of course, the cyber security strategy. We have a new national cyber security strategy, which we are at the moment putting in the action. And that cyber security strategy was done with the close cooperation with the cybersecurity industry in Finland. In the past years, Finland has taken part in EU large-scale pilots, and we are a member in Cloud for Europe. And we do a lot of cooperation within the OECD, EU, Nordic countries levels. And we have, as President Ilves revealed, we have a very special cooperation and planning in place with Estonia. We are trying to simplify Finnish architectures. As I mentioned, we have lots of agencies and lots of municipalities which are very old organizations. They started using ICT in the 60s, 1960s. And therefore they have all kinds of structures and architectures by themselves. But now we are trying to simplify the structure, have one national level ICT service architecture in a similar way that Estonia has managed to accomplish. And we are doing that with Estonia, and we are aiming, of course, to the future together. So, as a conclusion, it's not the technology, but it is why, for what, and how you use it. Technology is a cost, and you should think of how to have more value for that cost. We, as a developed country who has used ICT 50 years, we have a problem what to do with all the technology we own at the moment. For example, in state administration, we have 170 computer centers. We have lots and lots of infrastructure what we own at the moment. And one thing for us to strategically plan is how to get rid of that the unnecessary infrastructure. And how can we increase the value of ICT? One is that we should be not only citizen-centric in our planning, but we should be citizen-driven. We should plan for cross-border in every level. There is lots of borders within the public sector, of course between the countries, but within the countries too. And we should have better understanding of information policy, what is important in the handling of information in societies and between countries. We should have better legislation. We should have more harmonization, cooperation, consolidation, and cost-value optimization. Thank you.
Thank you, Timo. So, Rytis, if I could ask for your comments.
Dear President Ilves, dear guests, hello, I'm Rytis Kalinauskas. I'm representing Information Society Development Committee and the Ministry of Transport and Communications. I'm very glad that I have a possibility to participate in this panel too, and to give you view of Lithuania's perspective and perspective on cloud computing from committee's view. As we know, there are strong initiatives to create European Union cloud computing market. European Union has key enablers to do that. It's one of them, I think, it's high-speed internet, and the European Union is investing in that area a lot. And it creates good possibilities to use cloud computing services in the state area and between different states. According to European Commission communication, as a result of adoption of cloud computing, 80% of organizations reduce costs by 10 to 20%. So the question is, who doesn't need that? I think that every institution, every company needs that and understand that it is a good way to work more efficiently. The situation with the public sector is, the main question is how to attract public sector to use cloud computing. If they want, public institutions will find a lot of arguments not against cloud computing. That can be legal uncertainty, that can be security issues, it can be service continuity, and etc. So the second question is that is the only way to make public institutions or public sector to use cloud computing is strict instructions from government. I think that there are two scenarios possible. For some public institutions, the first case scenario might work. And what we have in Lithuania, we have interoperability platform created and developed, and it gives possibility for public institutions to create and deploy electronic services using platforms infrastructure. That means that yes, you create electronic service, the process of that service, but you don't need to have data center, you don't need to have servers, software, and etc. And here in Lithuania, e-services of municipalities are deployed in such way right now. And I think this is the case where public sector institution is attracted to use cloud computing, because it understands that I do not have good infrastructure or developed infrastructure right now, and instead of building data center of my own institution, I can use other platform, or we can say that I can use cloud computing service and to develop electronic services that way. Yes, there are, it can be said that there are two kinds of players when we talk about public institutions. One of them, like I mentioned, are institutions that do not have well-developed infrastructure, so they can be attracted more easily to use cloud computing services. And of course, there are institutions, public institutions, who has developed their infrastructure to a certain level. And they are not very likely to use cloud computing because they have something of their own. So I think this is the second case scenario where some strict instructions should be imposed or taken. What is the main idea of that is that state has to build a cloud computing model of the state. And it should look at that model like the state is business company. Because if there will be a situation like it is right now, that every institution is building cloud computing solutions on their own, they put institutions' interests at the first place, and the effectiveness of those solutions are not they are not so effective. Instead, if we could, if we could take state's approach to cloud computing and to build that model. Financial model of public sector cloud computing, that's quite important issue too. What situation we have in Lithuania, it's, in simple words, it's easier to get financing for building or creation or development of different IT solutions instead of support of those solutions or also cloud computing services. So what we acknowledge that we need in Lithuania, we need to create planning of IT expenses. And it should make no difference for what kind of IT expenses I am planning my institution's budget. It's for equipment, it's for software, or it's for services. But all they are associated with IT solutions and support of those solutions. And this approach will allow to make cloud computing services to public institutions much more accessible, because they will be able to have finance to buy those services. And I think that the final goal, if we talk about government cloud computing, is to enable effective usage of both public institutions' data centers and private sector data centers, because the state doesn't has a need to build all the data centers of their own. The more effective way can be to use some part of private companies' data centers and to deploy cloud computing solutions in that way. And of course, when we will have functioning model of EU cloud computing market, private companies' data centers that are established not only in Lithuania, but in any EU member state will have a possibility to provide cloud computing services for public institutions. So that's the goal, and I think that we should move to that, and I hope that we will reach that goal. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Rytis. So we now have 4 contributions from industry. I would remind my colleagues from industry that we have a great reputation for delivering on time and to budget. So I make that 4 contributions of 7 minutes. We should be finished our industry session by 10:30. Now, what I heard, I think, from Timo and Rytis was something about a long-established tradition of IT, a lot of infrastructure, lots of data centers, and yet Rytis made the point that, in a sense, it's a no-brainer. The financial benefits of moving to cloud are compelling, yet we have all this existing infrastructure. So I'd be very interested to hear from our Lithuanian colleagues how they find the market, how they find the public sector market. Is it moving to cloud? And then perhaps from our international colleagues, how do they see that market moving in different parts of the world at different paces, and are there things that we can learn? So Ilya, let me move to you first and speak from here or from there as you wish.
Sure. So yeah, I was asked to join this panel, this very honorable panel, as a business representative. Well, apparently we are running some cloud infrastructure. It's pretty big. We now moved to the ES, and we have a pretty huge system to track 300 million users, and we process today 3 billion events per day, which is quite big. And as a business, I sometimes realize that there are actually a lot of concerns that I really start seeing after understanding and comprehending what this, say, cloud infrastructure and moving into cloud means in terms of unprecedented amount of data and vulnerability that comes with just collecting the data. So what I decided after joining this panel is that we're probably very interested to highlight as a citizen, as a small European country citizen, a couple of areas which I thought would be great for discussing in this panel and given the representatives. So what I really wanted to touch in this discussion is understanding, safety, and transparency. Understanding in a way, sometimes as a citizen, I become very concerned. Does anyone at all understand what are the consequences of really collecting all those data, storing the data, having the data available? Just to share you some perspectives, a couple months ago, I was shocked to realize that in the United States, as much as 25% of all divorces, 25% of all divorces are due to just Facebook. So they used to say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Now they say, what happens in Vegas stays on Facebook. And when I realized, well, probably 25% is such a huge number that we cannot speak that this is like random events. We're talking about the technology, specifically Facebook technology, specifically being able to collect the data, share the data, really starts to conflict with the very basics of humankind, like the ethical values, like the morality. So, apparently there is a huge incentive for business. When I said we're collecting 3 billion events a day, there is a huge incentive for business to collect the data. apparently we can optimize our business. I can know precisely to tell every person that we collected data on what application he's using, where he's using, when he's using, how long he's using, who's he chatting with, who our friends are, etc., etc., etc. So there's a massive incentive for both the government and the business to collect the data, but do we really understand what happens, what the consequences are? You know, looking at the industries like an automobile industry, it took years until before the car was available and until we really found out the safety regulations. You know, we invented the street lights because before that it was basically anarchy. So, so one of the points I'd really like to address at this panel is, you know, if businesses really have a massive incentive to collect the data, if governments do, does anyone discuss at all what the consequences are? And, you know, if yes, you know, how it's done? You know, what's a philosophical component of actually all those technologies that we're using? And second is apparently safety. Well, apparently if you follow the news, you know that one of the greatest inventions of our time is the iPhone, and the latest version of iPhone can read your fingerprints, right? So half of the common users that I talk to say, well, you know, I'm really concerned. That means, you know, what if Apple just, you know, accidentally loses those fingerprints and some criminal just, you know, puts my fingerprints on the scene of crime? You know, I am concerned because, you know, every time I touch the little button, you know, I have no clue what's going to happen to my fingerprints. So, so what's happening to this data? Apparently, when you read stories that, you know, corporations like Sony, PlayStation lose hundreds of millions of credit card records, that moment you understand, well, you know, there's no such thing as a guaranteed safety. You know, when you follow the latest trends in the industry, you realize that Google are starting to collect your DNA data. There are millions of records at Google somewhere. Again, I have no clue what's happening there, that actually know DNA for a lot of people. And people are submitting their DNA because Google is promising actually a lot of good things to do with the data. For example, they can track DNA and potentially spot DNA diseases and then tell you what potentially you're exposed to. So, but again, you know, who's regulating the safety of those things? We're collecting massive amounts of data. And for example, in Lithuania, you know, there is this data protection, privacy protection law that says, you know, my personal tax identification number is subject to a ton of regulations, ton of safety procedures, but my DNA, excuse me, to me, it's more valuable than my taxpayer number, and it can be read by companies like Google. And my fingerprint can be exposed to anybody, you know, who just hacks into an iPhone system. So that is a real concern. You know, who watches the watchers? Who sets the rules? Finally, it's the transparency. Apparently, if you talk about citizens, there is a massive concern that, you know, there is everybody collecting the data about anything and everything. There are rumors that, you know, governments are forcing companies like Facebook or Google to submit the data, to create backdoors in the phones, and you know, when you travel, when you talk, you know, no longer feel safe. And again, as a citizen, this is a big concern because as a citizen, one of the biggest promises of government is my safety, my protection, because this is my basic need as a humankind. As you know, according to Maslow's pyramid, necessity for feeling safe is one of the very basic human necessities. Otherwise, you know, a human being cannot be happy. So those are the issues. Again, those are the concerns, and those are various understanding. What does the technology mean? Safety, you know, how do we make sure that everything we collect is really safe, and then transparency, making sure, you know, that everybody understands the procedures. Every time, you know, you submit to Google, you know that, you know, Google can send certain information to government and how it's done, just understanding. So these are the areas I'd like to address. Thank you.
Bit of a squeeze to get out there, Budkas.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am representing company Bluebridge, and we're a cloud service provider. So I'm going to be talking more about the down-to-earth things and what kind of barriers we meet when trying to move public organizations to the cloud. So instead of talking how to make it more attractive, because I think the concept is attractive enough, so I'm just going to say a couple factors that we meet, which are the barriers. So one of the main barriers at the moment is, as Rytis mentioned, is financial policy of the government, which facilitates more capital investment rather than purchases of services. And on the same hand, since for the last 5 years and in the next coming years, the majority of investment in IT is going to be made by EU-funded projects. EU-funded projects also facilitate the purchase of equipment and systems, which means capital investment. So there is no reason for the public organizations to move to the cloud because they have money for the capital investments rather for the services. So there is a need to fix some financial policies if government wants public organizations to move to the cloud. The second barrier is a universal barrier, and it's a barrier of security. Of course, organizations feel a little insecure to move their data to the cloud because the lack of knowledge what is a cloud and how it works, for them it feels insecure to move the data. So there might be a need for some compliance standards so that organizations could better evaluate the service providers and how secure they are and what are the procedures to make this data secure. And the third reason, which is very down to earth barrier, but still it is a barrier and it shouldn't be neglected, is personal security, especially when we're talking about IT people. And especially if we talk about medium-sized or small organizations, IT people don't have a strategic role in the organizations. They are not concerned about how to align IT to the processes and how to make organizations more effective. Their daily tasks involve maintenance and support of the systems they have, which means if they move those systems to the cloud, they're basically out of job. And, but the main, I think, goal of internal IT is to have more strategic position in organization because they understand IT and they can understand what's happening in organization, so they can focus more on how to make organization more productive by aligning IT and processes. So if government would take that into consideration and move IT into the strategic positions so they can think about those issues of effectiveness, then there might be less resistance from IT people of moving to the cloud, because IT people is still a decision point whether the organization is going to move to the cloud or not. So those are three barriers: so financial policy, security, and personal security. So, thank you.
Very crisp and to the point. So Dejan's the CTO for Central and Eastern Europe for Microsoft. So you've seen it from a wider perspective. You're taking this one.
Thank you. Mr. President, distinguished guests, thank you very much for the opportunity to address this audience. My name is Dejan Cvetkovic. I'm a Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft in Central and East Europe. I am a professional engineer. I used to be a professional developer in Microsoft 20 years ago. So you can only imagine the level of my passion when it comes to the adoption of cloud computing in Europe. We heard that there are enormous benefits for cloud usage. That's the savings of time and money. One barrier that I would like to talk about is trust. And I would like to offer 4 different methods that I personally use in order to boost the trust in the cloud. So the first one is, through my job, I have the opportunity to talk to many cloud users or potential cloud users and to many cloud providers, no matter if they're big or small. And when I talk about trust, both to the users and the providers, I encourage the discussion about privacy. I basically think that each cloud provider has to have a simple, short, crisp, clear privacy statement on their website that has 0 legal language. Legal language creates a rejection towards cloud computing. It is crispness, clearness about the privacy statement. As a user, I want to know, how is my data collected? Where is it stored? How is it stored? For what purposes it is used? Is it scanned? Is it data mined? And for what reason? And if I understand what is written there, I can make a call. Do I trust this provider or no? The second one is actually the work that European Commission is doing, and I'd like to thank Commission and Mario especially for the work on the code of conduct for the cloud computing. European Data Protection Directive encourages the adoption of the code of conduct. So it's a very structural approach towards the trust, towards boosting the trust. What are the minimum set of rules, the minimum set of requirements, the minimum of data protection that each and every cloud provider that wants to play in Europe needs to meet in order to negotiate their business, in order to negotiate their offering to the European customers. The third one is, I actually tried to find the scenario that is not directly correlated to the trust in the cloud, to privacy, security, confidentiality. It's still connected to the integrity, which again is probably the most important one. But there is one type of data that is not personal, that is not private, and that is not confidential. And that type of data we call open data. Open data is extremely valuable. Some studies basically say that there is 24 billion euros of data value available annually in the European Union that is not used. Why is open data not used? Because it sits on some old governmental servers. It is in the proprietary format. It's not connected to the internet. And it's not interoperable, or I would say it resides in some proprietary data formats. But now we have a cloud. We have public cloud that can be a mediator for bringing the power of open data to both application developers and the customers, the users of that open data. Cloud is there to help us bring that data from those proprietary servers and put them in a cloud in a format that is based on commonly adopted industry standards. And then we here in this room are the ones who would encourage hundreds of application developers to take a look at that data, realize the power of that data, and build apps for millions of devices, no matter if those are iPhones, Android phones, Windows phones, iPads, any kind of tablets, because there is an enormous value to the citizens who would use that open data to improve their lives. And that is to be enabled by the cloud, that is to be enabled by the public sector. And the fourth one that I would like to offer, and I really want to use this forum to encourage Brussels to examine the public procurement of information technology based on European structural funds and instrument for pre-accession. The current public procurement model calls for the procurement of assets, no matter if those are hardware or software. The current public procurement model does not even touch the opportunity to procure services from public clouds. If we enable the procurement of services using European structural funds, we will create an opportunity for creating a critical mass for the adoption of public cloud computing. Thank you very much.
Well, that was crisp and clear. Thank you very much. So, last but by no means least, Xavier, let's have your contribution.
So, thank you. Thank you for the audience. Thank you, President, to host me there in this panel. My name is Xavier Poisson, and I am the Vice President for Cloud Computing in HP in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've been building the cloud story at HP for the past 5 years, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you some real feedback from the ground on some new ideas that we believe could help to unleash the potential of cloud computing in the EU. If we consider everything that has been said here, it was wonderful. The open data, the open remark of the President with the different collaboration with the different countries. If you have a look at all of that, we speak about data centers. We spoke about telecommunication. But there is one fundamental thing that has not been addressed. And it is a value proposition that I came here to put on the table, is really to think about the creation of what I would call a common framework for the service catalog in the EU. When you think about how the cloud computing can benefit to the countries in the EU, the citizens, the mid-market, how we can use cloud computing to reduce, and it has been said, the debt of our countries in the EU. What is missing there? What is missing is the usage, ladies and gentlemen. We have hundreds of data centers, as you said also, in the EU, who are empty, fully empty, who have been built in order. We provide some cloud services. And today, guess what? If nothing is moving, they will go for bankruptcy. Because there is no usage. So now, we thought about that at HP, and because we are not a big cloud service provider, we are enabling companies or government to build their cloud with our technology, nothing more. If you have a look at big companies who have been doing and you asked me for foreign experience, in the US or in other places, some large cloud, what was it about? During the past 5-6 years, they have invested in huge capacity, building data centers, putting a lot of hardware in order to serve. The second big thing they have done is to create a huge telecommunication network. And as you said, we have that in the EU. And if you consider players on the planet like Google, like Amazon, like some other companies, what is the third element that enables them to attract developers in order that new applications are brought on the table in order they can be consumed by a huge market across the planet? A service catalog and a unique service catalog for their offer. If you are working with Amazon or Google, everywhere on the planet you can subscribe to the same service, coming from any horizon of all the planet. Why are we waiting all together in the EU to create this kind of framework in order that all the cloud service providers inside the EU who have been powering some data centers, or the government who have been investing in building the data centers, can benefit from a single common framework of service catalog for application creation, attracting the developers, avoiding that all our young people are flying to the US or Singapore to build apps? This is something we should think about. I would say that we have good experience in that, and we have been investing in that dimension. And let's have a dream. At the time when we all suffer in the EU from our debt, for all government need to collect money as quickly as possible in order that we have a safe economy and we can re-inject in the small and medium business. And if a tax collection system with electronic cashiers that would collect automatically into a cloud 300 million euro every day without having to subscribe, to put declaration, and to avoid grey market. If such an application was made in one of the EU countries, why shouldn't it be brought immediately through a service catalog to all the other countries? This can be done today. I can tell you, we have invested heavily in one of the fundamental pieces, and it was mentioned before, of the progress of cloud computing and the progress of the small and medium business, education. Today, to tell you, with one single service catalog, we have been able to get more than 120,000 students in less than 6 months. 120,000 students. We are very specific students because they are self-entrepreneurs, to connect to a single platform, a single service catalog powered by clouds in every single country to respect the data privacy. This is what I call, and I would end there because I know the time is counted, by our vision for the EU, for the cloud of clouds. Thank you.
A very impassioned call for a service catalogue, and I hope we can have the opportunity to explore that. So this event this morning is part of a series that Digital Europe has run called Cloud in Practice. And the idea has been to get under the skin of some of the issues of cloud, to see what they're really about in practice. Because as I think, as President Ilves and Mario both said, there's a lot of people talk a lot about cloud with very little knowledge, it seems to me. And I think to have such a fantastic panel to really help us get understanding, get really under the skin of the issues, well, I personally found that a very, very good set of contributions, and I hope you did too. Now, this series that Digital Europe runs to look at different aspects of the cloud is all run under the auspices of something in Digital Europe called the Cloud Council. And if I may, I'd just like to ask the chair of our Cloud Council to say 90 seconds about that. Jean-Jacques Sahel. We agreed a minute, but I've just extended his remit by 50%.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Having more than 60 seconds. Good morning, everyone. Moi, Mr. President, Tere, moi. It's a pleasure to be here. I work for the same company as Dejan, but I actually come from a Baltic company originally that's now part of Microsoft, that actually adopted a cloud as its logo already back in 2005, because it was a company that was effectively born in the cloud before it was called the cloud. It was Skype. And to me, the cloud is really exciting, both because I think that Europe's got a real potential in it, but also because we have to move to the cloud. And this is one of the things that motivated us to create the Cloud Council at Digital Europe. The mission of the Council, which was actually started on the same day as the ECP on the 4th of July, I think that was our first meeting. The mission is very much to make Europe a world-leading cloud economy and cloud society. To do that, we need to raise awareness generally in the public, so that end users are happy to use the cloud, adopt the cloud, and same with businesses. We need to enable SMEs to understand what a cloud is, to understand how a safe, secure, and private cloud can develop. And we need to engage with policymakers to explain to them what it's about and work with them to encourage that adoption in the public sector. We've got a lot of work to do, and Digital Europe is working hard on that. And for anyone in the room that would like to get engaged, please talk to me, or to John, or to colleagues at Infobalt. We need as much help as possible to really make people understand that beyond all the debates and the media hype, there's actually a technology which Europe needs to not only adopt, but actually lead in globally, so that it actually remains a relevant region in the 21st century. Europe needs to be a cloud champion globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Jacques. So I promised you half an hour for discussion and questions, and that is exactly what we have. Let me get the ball rolling with two questions while you think. And Vilma, do we have microphones for the audience as well? Yes. So the usual thing, if you want to make a contribution, please put up your hand and say who you are. But two things, one for you, Mario, and one for you, President Ilves. Mario, this point about structural funds being geared to the acquisition of assets rather than services does seem to be a bit like shooting ourselves in the foot here from a cloud perspective. Have you any thoughts about how we might resolve that? Is that something that we could fix? And President Ilves, you mentioned this sharing of data between your government, so I think particularly say between yourself and Finland. This idea of a shared data area has got, some people have jumped on this and said, oh, that's great, that's a sort of Fortress Europe approach, which I think is another example of misinformation. I wondered if you might just explain what the thinking is in the cloud partnership about this shared data area. So, Mario, can we maybe ask you to address this first question?
I think that what became quite clear in all these presentations, I appreciate some of the presentations that went more into some social aspects of the deployment of cloud, because clearly this is not only a matter for technology, it's not only a matter for research, it's not even only a matter for traditional innovation, because there is legislative domains. I mean, there is even in some countries, I mean, where the fact that you simply try to bring some servers from different authorities, regional, national, into one single server cannot be done because the constitution of the country itself prevents it to be done. And in the structural funds, we are exactly in this situation. I mean, I'm very glad that it was referred twice here today, but when I was recently in Poland, and I have here Anna also from the European Social Committee that is very worried about that, because indeed, when we go to the real life, and when procurers want to really buy things, the framework, the legal framework, almost prevents to acquire services because it favors having its own computer, its own software, its own license, etc. So that's something that we have to overcome. And this is particularly pressing when we come to new member states that really want to use structural funds to overcome some of or to go into cloudification of the structures, and we find this. So this is certainly something that we have to address. But I want to say that this is just part of the big picture. I mean, is the understanding, the acceptance. I mean, it's not mine, it's shared. So I mean, I lose something. It's like if we lose something of our own. So there is a lot of efforts that we do, and I wanted to take this opportunity to appreciate Digital Europe efforts to get this really understood by big quantities of people. So procurement we need to work. It's particularly important when linked into structural funds, and we are working with some of our colleagues in DG, in the DGs responsible to overcome that. Thank you.
Well, let me just clarify one thing. First of all, we're not talking about Finns looking at Estonian data or vice versa. We're talking about a service that operating on a common flat platform, and that's an architecture that is then trustworthy and highly developed, that can be used by Finns, that can be used by Estonians, and that can be used by citizens or card holders anywhere in the two countries, and access the services that are connected to this software. So it's, as I said, the drugstore. So it's not that we're looking at that we have a common data, that we have common data or common access to data. This is the key thing to understand. And for me, what I see is while we are talking about, in this case, government services, or at least or services that are private sector ultimately, but moderated or modulated by the government, and it is the only thing that is capable of doing this. We would like to see much more private sector possibilities here. We have to all admit that digital commerce, cross-border commerce, is somewhere in the Stone Age compared to where it is in the United States. And when everyone's complaining about how our economies are doing badly, we are not removing the legal barriers or the technological and architectural barriers to actually getting this thing moving and working. I'll give you a good example, I mean, which is sort of, I mean, kind of banal, but I mean, I have iTunes. I have friends who have iTunes. But because of the way things are regulated, probably because of VAT issues, if I order a friend of mine for his birthday a record, or I mean a recording on iTunes, if he's in a different country, or if he has a different country's credit card, I can't do it, which is stupid. I mean, it really is stupid because there's no reason why it should not work. I mean, they, you know, Amazon or Apple already has my card. I'm paying for it. The person cannot have access to it because very silly. Okay, so those are, I mean, and I think of, I mean, just I'm just one person, maybe I give 5 people a year this thing, but that's all part of the economy that is not being developed because this purely private sector thing doesn't work in Europe. There is no problem with that in Europe, I mean, in the United States, so they're making a lot more money than we are. Let me just clear one thing up also on the first issue. I mean, I think it's really stupid, and I would agree with what's said here, to put money into a lot of hardware data centers when the problems, as with what I just talked about, what is preventing development of the cloud, of cloud services, of cross-border commerce are legal, architectural, and technical issues. So it's kind of like putting huge amounts of money into concrete, but never really planning where the exits are on the highway that you're building with huge amounts of structural funds. It's really dumb. And so, or not dealing with the fact that you in fact have to build entrance and exit ramps and just worrying about having big highways. It's of course easy to do that. We know, I think all of our countries in the European Union know that it's a lot easier to have a big expensive project we can get a lot of money for, which doesn't require much thinking. But when it comes to this area of spending money, I would say don't spend it on building data centers, spend it on resolving first the architectural and technical and legal things that prevent us from moving forward.
Okay, so that's given you the opportunity, I hope, to reflect on some questions you might want to ask yourselves. So is there anybody who'd like to ask a question or make a contribution from the audience? Thank you. There's a lady here. If you could, Vilma, get her a microphone. Thank you. If you could introduce yourself before you
Yes, of course. Anna Nietyksza. I am coming from European Economic and Social Committee, Digital Agenda Group. Mario just mentioned our discussion. I am also president of Eurocloud Poland Association and a member of Eurocloud Council in Luxembourg. So my question is relating to all you said, gentlemen. How can we, in practice, change this government approach, specifically in Eastern European countries and Central European countries, to not to build government data centers which will serve local governments? This is the tendency, in fact, now in planning structural funds. And I was in consultations by the Polish government, and I just learned that we will build another data centers to serve local governments, and we will build data centers on local level, on regional level, on central level, and that will be cloud. So it's something wrong in it. But the question is that I think the real input should come from the Commission, because otherwise there is a lot of concerns about security now, and the main concern of the Polish Minister of Digitization I was talking to, it's just okay, well, but what about safety and security? How do you guarantee? And then you come into technical discussion. So just a comment about it, and I would also ask and call for education awareness campaign, but using media and concrete practice case studies. It's very, very needed in our countries, and we are planning, and we are just finalizing planning of huge amount of structural funds for the Central European countries. Well, let's say in all the member states, it's much easier to come with it. In the new ones, it's very, very complicated. And just by the end, I would like just to mention that as we achieved the accession of the new member states to the European Union, it was possible, even if it were so many concerns about it. I was director of the European Commission campaign, awareness campaign in Poland and Bulgaria, and it was possible to convince church that and nationalistic some approaches to join the EU. It will be certainly possible to convince, administration, government, and some reluctant people or organizations to join cloud idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure it's just the new countries that have the problem. Admittedly, my information is a little out of date now, but 2 years ago, when the UK government was looking at cloud, or maybe 3 or 4 actually, the response was, yes, we'll have cloud, we'll have our own cloud, we'll call it the government cloud, and in fact, we'll start by rationalizing the data centers, so we're not quite sure how many data centers we have, so that will take quite a long time just to rationalize the data centers. Timo, are you actually using public cloud in Finland, or are you using your own cloud?
We are actually doing the both. So for example, in a municipal level, some municipalities, they use proper cloud services. And those are very good for the smallest and medium-sized municipalities. But of course, as I mentioned in my speech, we have lots of infrastructure, and we have to decide which of this we will keep, and we will have, at the moment we have a private cloud, and we have a private cloud for all the high security needs and high availability and high continuity requirements. And then we have all the rest, which can be in a public cloud.
Do you think, I wasn't sure I quite understood your idea, but was your idea a sort of like an app store for Europe, really, so that a government or a municipality in Finland could say, do you know, I need an application to manage my public housing. Oh, here's one I can use. I'll just use it straight away. Would that address a real market need, do you think, this idea of an apps store for the public sector?
Yes, it would. For example, there is at the moment the Office 365 is used by some Finnish municipalities from the Microsoft cloud. So it's possible, but I think we all agree that we would like to have European producers in that kind of services more.
Let me just come back to one thing, just because we still continue to think in these sort of, when it comes to cloud and even discussions here, that there are these big centers. You don't need centers. You don't need any centers. You probably could use them. But my point is, how did we come upon our solution? It was that we were too poor 15 years ago to build a separate data center that would handle all government things, which then we said, how do we solve this? Well, then we came up with an architectural solution based on the idea of an enterprise service bus, and we just made a distributed system in which you could access. I mean, there's no reason why you need to have it all in one place and then spend all that money on cooling huge servers, and then you say, wow, we have a data center. You don't need that. And so the idea, I mean, if you have the proper architecture and the proper level of security, it doesn't matter where your data are. And given where RSA 2048 is today, please, you could store it on NSA servers if they were willing to rent it to you. It doesn't matter. They can't get in. And we need to get everyone away from this idea of spending huge amounts of money on having big boxes somewhere that are expensive to cool. And this also touches upon the issue of national legislation, again, based on some idea that it belongs to a different century, that you cannot store data outside your national borders. If you have the right level of security, you can store your data, store it in the People's Republic of China, store it in Russia, fine. They're not going to get at it. I mean, and the issue of security, if you really think about it, I mean, they're not getting into well-encrypted data. It's the dumb guy who downloads the keystroke logger onto his government PC, and everything he writes there goes off somewhere. It's not what is being transmitted between or across borders.
Anybody else want to, come in? So Mario and then Xavier. So Mario, let's use that one, and then David.
Just very briefly, but I mean, two concepts that since we started the implementation of the cloud strategy come continuously in our discussions, I think that are structuring to what we are discussing here. One is something like a cloud-first strategy. This means before you do something, think if you can do the same in a better way through cloud. And the second one is this concept of shared data area. It's very complex. I mean, it has to do with data protection. It has to do with aspects of data location and data location restrictions. It has to do with procurement, public procurement. But I think that if we would be able, and with all respect, sometimes we say the Commission has too, and I think that it's very nice and very kind of all of you to make these references. But I think that this is a collective endeavor. It will not be able to overcome it without member states, without even regional and local authorities. We see already some convergence in the reduction of the number of storage centers, going out of the logic that I have to have my own, Even at ministerial level, we see that different ministers, always find that they have a reason to consider that they have to be stored somewhere in a kind of a private storage room for them. But so, if we are able to collectively pass this message of data, of cloud first, with or without incentives, but a cloud first strategy, coupled with a shared data area concept that is developed, I think that we can make Europe really, advance strongly on that.
Come on.
Thank you. I have to say that I would really love to be in the situation to have the government customers speaking the way that President Ilves speaks. Mr. Ilves, you understand it and you articulate it in a way that is such a common sense that, obviously, when I speak that way, government customers say, yeah, he's coming from the vendor company. But when the government official of your rank is speaking, this is, I believe, the best possible way to advocate and to ensure the penetration of the ideas about public cloud computing. So if it is at all possible to have your voice being even stronger, I think that that approach would make a difference. Now, I'm not advocating for fragmentation of Europe or Fortress Europe or things like that. But today we face the barriers around data protection, data location, and sometimes I am engaged in the endless discussions around those. So in order not to lose time, in order not to waste time and wait for the changes in the legislations that will happen one day, but who knows when, the cloud computing industry does have the alternative. And some of us call those alternatives national clouds. And again, I don't want to advocate for the fragmentation, because today we do have the opportunity to make national clouds in order to ensure this data sovereignty that everybody's talking about. But if we make national clouds based on industry standards, ensuring the interoperability, ensuring the easy moving of applications from national clouds to the public clouds when the right time is, then we can progress today. And for some countries, for some bigger countries that have big governments, that have chief information office and chief information officer, they can afford to build those national clouds at the government level. But for the smaller countries, I actually encourage engaging and creating a public-private partnership with telecommunication companies, with postal companies. Telcos are losing business because PSTN networks are dying. Post companies are losing business because traditional post business is going down. But they have the skills and the capabilities to build the cloud infrastructure for the country, to offer services both for public sector and private sector customers, and again, using the common cloud European framework that we are responsible to build, ensure a seamless transition to the public cloud when the timing is right. This is, one of the suggestions. Thank you.
Well, it's really interesting. You are speaking about the Posta, and yes, you all have to know that the Posta are a terrific economic agent for cloud nowadays in the EU. We have just built a fantastic partnership with the Posta Slovenia, enabling Posta to come to new businesses and to serve and to participate to a network of providers with a single service catalog in the EU. So I absolutely agree with what you said. I just wanted to, yes, thank you, President, for what you said, because I need to say that as my Microsoft colleague, it's somebody in your stature can speak about that. And I believe we all need to understand that there is a difference in the cloud between what I call the service catalog, what is all the application layer, the service itself made of data attributes of applications and connectivity to some infrastructure and the infrastructure. I am not, for my side, on a global public cloud. I am for, according to the right service level agreement, because you use this application, it can go to a private, a public, or even a traditional. Why not? Why not? Some cases it's very important. And today it's working. It is working. What is not happening is that for all the developers in the EU member states, they do not see a willingness and a policy and an influence in order we create this right standard platform to develop application that could be on a global, as you said, app store, but it's not the right word, but for the understanding of the people, it may be interesting. And when you execute this app store, it may go and operate on any kind of data centers in the EU. Today, it's possible. We are doing that with some of the 60 cloud providers that we have been powering here in the EU. And really, it's a real hope for the EU if we want to undertake this way.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in with a point from the audience? Oh, yes.
Yeah, my name is Hannes Astok, coming from Estonia, from President's staff. I'd like to underline the question of data integrity, what was mentioned here already a couple of times. Because for me as a citizen, I think the data integrity is the main concern, if my data is somewhere in the cloud or wherever. If a data is stolen, let's say my health record is stolen, the damage for me can be that the health insurance company will just charge from me a little bit more money because they know how many holes I have in my teeth. But if somebody is changing my blood group from rhesus positive to rhesus negative and I get by accident to the hospital, so they probably drop me in the wrong blood and I'm just dead. If somebody is stealing the records about my property, okay, just somebody will know what I own, what is almost public in Estonia anyway. But if somebody is changing a couple of numbers in this record, probably I do not own this property anymore, because the only basis for the property is the digital register now. So I think if we are discussing about the protection of the data, it's not about stealing, how to protect it from stealing or copying it, but the main question, how to ensure that it's still integral, it's still the same. So whatever the solutions are, it must be considered also that whatever timestamping, whatever you provide as a solution for it, but it must be considered in the standards also. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Anyone else want to come in with any points or questions? So let me, we're 5 minutes from the end, which gives us just under a minute each for a final remark. What final conclusions would you draw? What would be the one point that you would make that would help public administrations in Europe adopt cloud computing in an appropriate and sensible way, that in turn would help Europe become a center for cloud expertise and take full advantage of all the benefits that cloud can offer? What's your one thought about how public administrations could drive us down that route? Let's do it in reverse order, if you can remember your order. So Xavier, your final thought.
Yeah, you know, I will just come to what I said. It is a global service catalog platform, independent from the data center location, independent, and you know, inside or outside, because could connect to this platform everybody on the planet, and we need also to stimulate the ideas coming from outside. I believe that we are building towns. If you want to enter the town, if you see a big wall, you don't want to enter. And remember, in Berlin, we have broken the wall. What is happening today, it is circulation. Now, if you want to circulate to the right house, you need to know where it is located. And today, my feeling is that we should tell to the small and business or medium business what they can consume into the cloud from a single pane of place. If not, they will not consume.
I will just say one sentence. Open data applications will improve lives of the citizens and immediately generate a further demand for public cloud computing and create new jobs in the information technology industry, because many developers will be required to build those applications. Thanks.
Yeah, I like the idea of Mario of this cloud-first policy or strategies. So if the government would think in those terms of if they want to buy something as an investment, first to think maybe they can do that on the cloud, that would improve situation, definitely.
Yes, I would say one word: transparency, full transparency, because I believe that both businesses and citizens totally deserve to see what's happening regardless of what governments do.
So I think if we speak about cloud computing, there should be correct legal regulation. The financing model, the economic impact assessment, and then the most importance on the creation of e-content in the end. Yes.
I think that the public sector should start benefiting and learning from cloud as soon as possible. I think that there is lot of things to learn still in cloud, in the possibilities of the cloud, and we should start as early as possible, and whatever level, that's not important. Even in the agency level, just move to cloud and learn as you go. The supply side can help the public sector to try cloud services, keeping the upfront costs very low, and designing models where public sector just pays as it goes, monthly payments and elastic payments up and down. Those are very important issues.
So Mario.
I think that the internet economy as we know it is going to be catalyzed around big data, Internet of Things, and cloud. So we are really in the core of the future drivers for the internet economy. And in this respect, although we have created the European Cloud Partnership that we, distillate into a steering board and a real partnership, I'm calling here for a real partnership, broader partnership between private and public sector. The public sector, through our project C4 Europe, is coming together, not without difficulty, I must say. We don't find really an easy going on getting sensible budgets to exercise tests on public procurement and even less on cross-border public procurement. But I'm also appealing on the private sector to engage in providing us with the best practices and to really make a partnership with the public sector, and also supporting our particularly important network of small and medium enterprises. They are so important for the economy in Europe, and they can benefit greatly by a cloud-first approach. Thanks.
Okay, I think probably what you really need is to get every EU government to cabinet minister level, sort of a 2-day seminar on what it all means. Because I think too many people are thinking in a 20th or 19th century paper world, and the objections they have to all kinds of things come from thinking they don't understand what is possible to do with these days, with data, how to do it, how to secure it, how to protect it, how to maintain data integrity. And so the chasm between the ultimate policymakers and the reality that we face is so huge that you get suggestions to do a European NSA or something like that. This is the problem. I think ultimately because they're political decisions to say, okay, why don't we do this? But if you have people going for 19th century, or think in 19th century terms and exploit populism that way, in terms of preventing all the things that we need to do, then we will remain stuck. And so I would say, basically, maybe the European Union can provide every member state's cabinet with a 2-day seminar. I think it would save a lot more money for all of us.
Well, look, let's do a deal then. So if you send the invitations and you get them to come, I will definitely get the industry to provide all the technical expertise, and I'm sure with Mario's help we could get a good smattering of a good gathering of the chief information officers together to give their perspective on it as well. So I'm sure if you'd agree to send the invitations out and get them to come, I'm sure we could put a 2-day event together that would make a huge difference. I think that's a great idea, and I'm definitely up for that if you are. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're just a few minutes after 11. We'll hand back to Vytautas, our host here. I've enjoyed your contributions. I've enjoyed very much the panel's contributions. I hope you will join me in giving them a big round of applause while we ask our host back to the stage.
Thank you for a nice discussion. We understand that creating new services, especially using open data, it will increase drastically the use of the cloud computing. And you know, we Lithuanians sometimes feel a little complex that Estonians all the time are in front of us. So on this case, we would like to show that sometimes we also could be smart. And based on this our discussion, we immediately create a new service. So please, Augustas Alešiūnas, bring this Lithuanian so-called nose. This nose, we would like to give a present as a present to Mr. President of Estonia, and it doesn't mean that this nose will allow us Lithuanians to be inside of the IT affairs of the Estonians, but it will allow us, if the data, of course, will be put on the cloud computing, really you, your family, or your friends are using fresh meat and fish when you are going to the restaurant. And we will be glad if you will share this information with us.
Dear Mr. President, from the side of Lithuania, it's a great honor for me today to present you the unique and the first in the world electronic nose for households in everyday use. And this device detects all kind of different levels of freshness for meat, poultry and fish. So whenever you go to the shop or to the supermarket or the market, you can know exactly immediately, is it good for you to eat or better to throw it away? And let me show you quickly how does it work, if it's possible. So can I take it? Yeah, thank you. The electronic nose is connected to the smartphone, to the app, and it inhales different type of gas to itself. Please, could you turn it on? Yesterday we bought some chicken, so it should be like average level of freshness. And let's try to do that. I just need to press on the app that this is the chicken. Yeah. It inhales now, right now. It's doing something, and if you inhales, then the app like trying to do some kind of average calculations. It takes a couple of seconds, and immediately you can know the recommendation and the possibility to get sick or to have a nice meal for you immediately. So now it shows, you see, three. It says that it's average and you can eat it, but you can eat it at your own risk. So, yeah. So it's one more time, it's a great honor that today we will present you the prototype of the electronic nose, and we will give you a certificate that you will be the first person in the world who will receive international shipment, and it should be in the next January. So thank you very much and be safe. And this is also like complimentary to use it in the kitchen if you like, you know, do some steak.
But please promise that you will share with us this information, what kind of meat you are eating.
Thank you. Super.